Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Someday love will find you. Break those chains that bind you. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and I can't be too awful loud. Moe is still sleeping in the next room. So we are covering Dark Knight's Death Metal #3. This is going to have a moment in this comic where it's going to be the most Batman moment that's ever existed in the history of comics. And I feel like everybody who's ever been against Batman will just use it as like a sounding call of like, see, I told you. Like, I feel like that's what's going to happen. Okay, so for those of you guys who are just joining us, two things have happened since the last video that we did. The first major thing is that the Batman Who Laughs has fully taken on, or at least begun to take on, the power of Dr. Manhattan, but he's not at full strength yet. That's an important distinction that we had to kind of, solidify and specify in the last video that we did, that he's not 100% at Dr. Manhattan's power. He's getting there, and he's learning how to use that ability, but he's still figuring it out. And the other thing that happened is that you basically had a strike force that was led by like Wonder Woman and Batman and Harley Quinn, and it served the purpose, and really I guess what's left is Swamp Thing, but it served the purpose of them leaving the Earth in a giant mechanized suit, more or less, to travel to Apokolips and to basically free a lot of the heroes who were there. Now, the funny thing about this is that once they arrive here, they're immediately met by what are basically Robin demons, like para-Robins is what they call them, right? Now, for those of you guys who aren't familiar with that, the para-demons are kind of like the main force of Darkseid. And what really happens here is various worlds that are conquered by Darkseid, either its citizens are destroyed on that world, or they're conscripted, and they're basically transmogrified, basically meaning they're rematerialized into parademons to serve his own purposes. And so with that being the case, immediately these para-Robins showing up here is kind of like, okay, so we know that like right off the bat, this planet Apokolips was ruled by Darkseid until a version of Batman who basically became Darkseid managed to overtake it. Now, something else that I also want to point out here is that happening at the same time on Apokolips as their arrival is basically what amounts to what's known as the Night Glider. This guy's basically Silver Surfer, right? I mean, that's more or less what it is. Batman's biggest fear is that he becomes a character from Marvel Comics. That's one of his fears. You've also got a version of Batman who became Brainiac, but more importantly than that, and what's cooler than that, is a version of Batman who became Atrocitus, the leader of the Red Lantern Corps. Now, it's called Batrocitus. I don't know how I feel about the name, but it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, Atrocitus, Batrocitus, makes perfect sense. But it's cool to see this, right? It's cool to basically see this idea that like Batman became Atrocitus in like the Dark Multiverse. Because remember, the Dark Multiverse is basically just made up of worlds of people's biggest fears, right? So Batman presumably has an infinite number of fears. And because he has an infinite number of fears, there's an infinite number of Earths where Batman's fears come to life, right? And this is just a couple of them. And that's what makes this kind of interesting, right? Is it was literally the Batman Who Laughs traveling the Dark Multiverse and just grabbing these different versions of Batman and then bringing them all to his cause to basically, lead to the fall of Earth and then expand his sphere of influence. Because at the end of the day, the goal of the Batman Who Laughs is to destroy Perpetua, right? The creator of the first multiverse, and to basically usurp her power and then recreate the multiverse in his own image. That's the whole goal behind what he's doing. And so you've basically got the main DC Universe Batman, you've got Wonder Woman, you've got Harley Quinn, you've got Swamp Thing, and as soon as they get in here, we end up finding out that what's happening inside this place is essentially they look like they're looking for Superman. And Superman, of course, is being held in stasis with this giant device that was created by Mr. Miracle. Now, it wasn't done intentionally. Scott Free didn't build it for the purpose of serving this Darkseid Batman. It's one of these things where Darkseid Batman basically just probed his mind and figured out that this kind of thing existed. But what's cool here is it introduces new shades of kryptonite. Now, it doesn't really do it insofar as, an itemized list, right? So like, here's a new shade and it's what it does. And here's another shade and here's what it does. It doesn't really work that way. Instead, it's just kind of like new shades of kryptonite that basically drain the power of Superman. Now, what this does, and this is one of those important moments in comic books, for those of you guys who are not familiar with this is one of those important moments where what's going to happen is at some future point in time, some writer's going to draw on this. Some writer's going to take this and then basically say some shade of this kryptonite was left over from the Dark Multiverse and now it's available to use against Superman. And what that particular shade does is left to any number of circumstances. And they'll probably hand wave it and just say the reason why it doesn't drain his Kryptonian cells the way that it does right now is because it was all the different shades working together. This one has its own properties and it does this thing, that's most likely what's going to happen. But it's kind of interesting because what Darkseid Batman does here is play mind games with Superman. This is cool. This is actually genius of Scott Snyder, because one of the things that Batman is best known for is playing mind games. It's his whole shtick. It's how he keeps Gotham in line to a degree that the average person doesn't want to get swept up by the Batman, that in a lot of ways, he's more myth than truth. The Batman kind of allows these legends to sort of permeate about what he can do, that he can fly, or that he's not really even a man, you know, that kind of a thing. He allows those myths to kind of exist because they bolster to the element of fear and help to keep Gotham in line. And so playing these games with Superman, he kind of says, like, have you ever wondered, you know, why it is that in the dark multiverse, every version of yourself is a tyrant? Every version of yourself rules over the entirety of that earth and the human populace in it. And those who don't follow your lead basically end up getting destroyed. This really kind of begs the question, is injustice part of the dark multiverse? Because it's interesting to see that reference, right? And it's a cool question, right? Like, is injustice in the dark multiverse? It's an interesting question to ask. I want to know what your thoughts are, right? Post a comment down, post a comment below, and let me know if you think that injustice is in the dark multiverse. But the cool thing about this is he basically says, you were sent to Earth from a dying world. And the idea was that you could arrive here on Earth and you could help make humanity better. But if there's any one thing that you've learned from watching humanity, it's that humanity is governed by fear. Fear of our own insignificance, fear of death, fear of people who look different. People are afraid of any number of different things. And that fear is what guides the entirety of humanity to make the kind of decisions that it makes. People say we don't need to engage in some kind of, you know, total destruction of the Earth, not because of the fact that like a nuclear holocaust would be bad for the environment or it would initiate like a nuclear winter, but because of the fear of what life under that circumstance would be like. Would they be able to survive? People are afraid of change, right? People get used to things being a certain way and they don't want things to be different. And so what Darkseid Batman basically hits at here is like, on these dark multiverse Earths where you rule as a tyrant, you came to the realization that the only way to truly guide humanity is to control humanity, that if left to their own devices and if given perfect freedom, humanity would use that freedom to essentially destroy itself. And so it's interesting. It's an interesting concept because in the middle of this whole torture scenario, and if I'm being honest with you guys, this is the part of the story where I kind of feel like Snyder falls a little short. But like as soon as you know, you have Wonder Woman and you have the main DC Universe Batman who show up, and you've got you know, Harley Quinn who shows up in Swamp Thing, then like, you know, Darkseid Batman's like, demons attack, kill them all, you know, and it's like, okay, like, you know, and for the most part the fight kind of progresses the way you would expect it to, you know, in the sense that you've got main DC Universe Batman doing his thing, you've got Wonder Woman doing her thing, you know, that kind of situation. But the problem is that so many of Superman's Kryptonian cells have basically been destroyed that if they yank him out of this thing, he'll immediately turn into a version of Darkseid, right? And so there doesn't really seem to be any way of getting around it. Now, in the middle of all that, of course, you basically end up having Darkseid Batman who approaches, you know, main DC Universe Batman and pulls a gun. And this is kind of a cool little moment that Scott Snyder references, right? He basically says it's a modified version of the gun that Darkseid used when he shot Batman during Final Crisis. Now, the difference here is that during Final Crisis, Batman was shot and then in turn basically ended up being time displaced. Under any normal circumstance, it would have killed him, but Batman's too popular to cancel, and so DC just time displaced him. And so basically it's modified so that what it's become is in effect the ultimate nullifier from Marvel Comics. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what that is, the ultimate nullifier is an artifact that was created by Galactus and it is essentially part of himself. But if a person with sufficient intelligence and willpower fires the ultimate nullifier at a being, then that being will simply cease to exist. And it won't be enough to say they don't exist. It'll be as if they never were. So nobody will remember who they are. Nobody will know they ever existed. Like, all memories of that person will be completely and totally wiped from the entirety of the universe. And that's exactly what's happening here. That if we say, for example, that this entire, you know, the entire attack launched here on Apocalypse is the idea of Bruce Wayne, right? Let's say that it was entirely his idea. It wasn't, but let's say that it was explicitly his idea. Then what this would mean is that if this bullet was pulled, or if this gun was the trigger was pulled, the bullet hit Batman, and he simply ceased to exist from the entirety of the universe, nobody would know why they were there, because everything from his existence stemming forward, so every idea that he's put out, all of that would simply just vanish. It would just disappear from everybody's mind, from the entire concept of the universe. It's a very metatextual thing, and of course, you know, Darkseid Batman pulls a trigger and shoots Batman. And so from there, it's kind of like, okay, essentially Bruce Wayne didn't die, right? Like he didn't cease to exist. And Darkseid Batman's like, how are you still here? And you know, basically Bruce Wayne says like, to watch the next part. And it's like, Clark, and ultimately this basically allows Clark Kent to break himself free. And the expectation is that he would succumb to anti-life, right? He would become the new Darkseid, but it doesn't. And the reason why is because of the Black Lantern ring of Batman. That the Black Lantern ring basically stopped Superman's cells from dying. That once they got in there, and basically it was revealed that this machine was killing off the Kryptonian cells of Superman, then ultimately what it meant is that the Black Lantern ring of Batman could stop the rest of these cells from dying. And so that basically saves Superman. That's why he's still here. Now, at the same time, the reason why Batman didn't die is a throwaway explanation, probably the most throwaway explanation that I've ever seen. And I feel like it's Scott Snyder playing it fast and loose and just being like, yeah, because he's Batman. You know, what other explanation do I need? need here. The question's asked, like, how did you survive that? And he's like, bat armor, like a bat blocker. And then that's all we get. It's literally like a single speech bubble, bat blocker. And then it's just kind of like, okay, he's Batman. He can do whatever he wants to do, right? Because it's what the plot calls for and it's how his character works. I feel like Batman fans are going to be pissed. They're going to be like, man, come on, but that's the way it goes, right? At the end of the day, this particular speech bubble, it really just kind of highlights what makes Batman Batman. He survives everything because he's Batman, right? And so from there, it's kind of looking into, okay, we need to find the rest of the heroes. And this is where the plan gets really, really cool, because what we end up kind of doing here is jumping over to Lobo. Now, Lobo's kind of been this wild card. Scott Snyder has kind of been throwing these moments with Lobo into the comic, and we don't really know what purpose it served. Now, it is cool to see him just shooting up the fifth dimension and killing everybody here, right? Basically introducing, death to a place where death didn't exist before. Even the sun's hiding behind the clouds, right? Like, everybody's dying there, and it's just kind of like, okay, I don't know how it is that Lobo can kill people in the fifth dimension, but whatever, man. I guess it works. And then like he gets up to like a tree, and then like kills the tree, and then it's like, okay, we switch back to everybody else. Now, at this point, we jump back to the Crypt of Heroes. And this is essentially Dr. Fate, and it's Wally West, and it's the JSA and all these guys. And then they're of course met by the arrival of the Robin King. Now, the Robin King we can do a video on. He's part of that Legends of the Dark Knight story that we did. We only covered one of the origins, and we can cover the origin on this one as well. But basically it's kind of a Robin who's putting his own gadgets together, and in a lot of ways is pretty twisted and pretty screwed up. But the cool thing is that inside of this utility belt that he has, he's got every way to kill superheroes seemingly in existence, right? So like his own little mini version of Tower of Babel. And he even kind of goes as far as to make this joke to say that, like, when it comes to Barry, for example, one of the things that he did is he basically took this kind of Speed Force substance and then put it on his mother's corpse that would basically liquefy the muscles of Barry Allen, right? So take like a Speed Force toxin and liquefy Barry's muscles. And then you turn around and stuffed it in a flash ring, right? So what would happen is Barry would he would, presumably this ring would be switched out. Barry would put on the ring that has his mother's body in it, and then he would press the button to activate the ring, and the body would just come flying out, right? And then basically wrap itself around Barry, which admittedly sounds funny as hell. And then like Barry's muscles would basically liquefy, and then he would die, right? Like in its most horrendous way. And from there, like it just kind of breaks down. He doesn't really go into specifics on everybody else, but what he says here is the reason why he's here is seemingly to watch the Batman Who Laughs die, right? That seems to be why the Robin King is here. Now again, if you guys want to see that whole story, we can cover it. But what they also realize is the Batman Who Laughs is coming. And the reason why is he's trying to get a hold of Wally West. Remember, Wally West has a portion of Dr. Manhattan's powers, and to collect that power from Wally West would basically allow, the Batman Who Laughs to completely attain the full-on abilities of Dr. Manhattan, and then from there, basically absorb anti-crisis energy. So basically the energy of Perpetua, or at least what Perpetua feeds on, and then overpower her, and then take over the multiverse, right? So he's like 2 steps away from being able to conquer everything. And so the response of Jay Garrick and Barry is, we got to get Wally out of here. And the question is, where do we go? And it's like, we do what we always do. We just run. And that's all it's going to be. It's just going to be them running and the Batman Who Laughs chasing after them, just running in all different locations, all different places. Now they're staying together as a team because it's easier for Jay and Barry to protect Wally in that way. But I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere along the line they end up having to break off. But from there, we basically switch back over to Superman and company. And of course, they rescue pretty much all the other superheroes who were there, right? So Mr. Terrific, Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern, Jessica Cruz, Beast Boy, Guy Gardner, John Stewart, Nightwing, all these different guys, the heroes that you for the most part know and love. And with them basically being restored, the question is, okay, what do we do now? And Wonder Woman basically reveals this whole thing was done for the purpose of launching a strike to basically rescue the most powerful hero among them. And the whole idea of this plan is to launch an attack on multiple fronts. That basically the idea is to travel to the Citadel where Perpetua is basically collecting all this energy from the Dark Multiverse and to basically destroy these citadels. The other one is to enter into Castle Bat. And the second thing, or the third thing, is to just kind of allow the Flashes to run in order to keep Wally West alive. Now, the way this is going to play out, and it's kind of cool the way the strike team is arranged, is that John Stewart will lead the Green Lanterns to basically the antennas, the kind of homing beacons where this energy is more or less being channeled, and take those out, right? To basically cut Perpetua off from her ability to harness this energy. And then in turn, you're also going to have Martian Manhunter, who's going to go with his own team after her throne, basically to try to take Perpetua head on. And then from there, you're going to have Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman, who are going to enter back into the Dark Multiverse and then enter into Castle Bat, basically the layer of the Batman Who Laughs. It's a multifaceted action. And when the question becomes, okay, who's this ultra powerful character that you're talking about? It turns out to be Jar Jarro. That Jarro is, as we know, a little fraction of Starro himself and is the most powerful psychic in the entirety of the universe. The reason why this is so important is because the best offense is a good defense, and that what Jarro can do is basically psychically block the existence of Wonder Woman and Batman and Superman inside Castle Bat. The biggest drawback to this is that if anybody is hunting, if the Batman Who Laughs somehow either breaks off the fight or breaks off the chase from Wally West or manages to capture him, then he's basically probably gonna reach out and say, okay, where does everything stand at the moment? Are the heroes still in Apocalypse? Okay, no, they're not there, they were saved. And then he's gonna start looking around and he's gonna realize he can't pick up Wonder Woman, he can't detect Batman, and he cannot detect Superman. And that's when he's gonna know that something's off. And then Batman Who Laughs, being as smart as Bruce Wayne, is gonna deduce they're going after his base of operations. That's most likely what's going to happen. Then of course he'll confront them head on. Now I'm assuming that. I don't know if that's really the case. Who knows? I also think an important thing to understand here is that Jarro is powerful in terms of his psychic abilities, but in terms of the most powerful hero in DC Comics, there's a lot of heavy hitters here. You got Amazo, you got Captain Atom, you got Martian Manhunter. Like, there's some pretty heavy hitters here. So to say that Jarro is the most powerful of the heroes, I think is a little bit of a stretch. But from there, we basically pick up with Lobo, right? Lobo having a conversation with someone, and he's asked, do you have the final box? And the response of Lobo is yes. Presumably it was inside the tree that he killed, right? He reached in the tree, killed it, ripped its guts out, and then, basically captured the box. And then initially it's kind of like Lobo wants to open it and know what's in it. And he's basically told, do not open that up, right? If you open that up, you're going to die. But ultimately, he ends up traveling back to the person he's talking to, which is basically revealed to be Lex Luthor. And that what this is inside this box, or inside these boxes, are what's called death metal. And that using this death metal, that Lex Luthor seems to either want to recreate the entirety of reality for himself, or to change things and to correct what it was that he did wrong, right? We don't really know what direction Lex Luthor's coming from here. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.